Welcome to Guam. Guam is an island that sits in the Pacific Ocean about 6,000 miles from the US mainland. It's actually 4 times closer to the Philippines than it is to California. And yet Guam is part of the United States. It's a United States territory. And the people that are born here are US citizens by birth. So how did this island out here in the middle of the Pacific end up in American control? To understand, we need to go back a couple thousand years to when the Austronesian people first discovered Guam. And there are people who settled here, and they were known as the Chamorro people. And over the centuries, they built a mature and a complex society. Now, the first Western or European contact didn't come until about 1521 when the famous explorer Ferdinand Magellan came aground down at the south of the island, and he was sailing his ship under the flag of the Spanish king. That was 1521. It wouldn't be until another 30 years that Spain would claim Guam as their own, as their discovery, their property. And then it was 100 years later in the 1660s when the Spanish started to colonize Guam. They brought a lot of their influence here, and even today you can see a lot of that influence. Guam remained a Spanish colony for about 300 years until the 1890s and the Spanish-American War. You might be like me and not know anything about the Spanish-American War and have to look it up, but I looked it up for you. The Spanish-American War started out when Cuba, which was also under the control of the Spanish, demanded their independence from Spain, and the United States backed the Cuban independence movement. The war concluded in 1898. It was rather brief, and the United States pretty handily defeated the Spanish. And as part of their surrender, they were forced to sign the Treaty of Paris. The Treaty of Paris gave Cuba their independence, and Spain had to forfeit some of their Pacific and Caribbean holdings, and so they had to surrender Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Philippines to the United States. The United States has held on to Guam for about 120 years now, and it's a very important location strategically for the military. There are a couple military bases here already, and there are talks to build even more in the future, potentially. I should also mention before I go that there is an ongoing discussion about the status of Guam and what it should be. Some people think it should be a commonwealth, give it a little bit more power to govern itself. Others want it to be the 51st state of the United States. And then there's others who think that it should be independent, that Spain never had a right to come in here and claim Guam as their own and colonize it. And the United States shouldn't have followed them up in doing that, and that Guam should be allowed to be a sovereign nation in and of itself. But current status right now, Guam is an organized, unincorporated territory of the United States.